I think I pretty much know everybody here, so welcome. Thank you for coming and hanging out again at the Rumble. It's good to start getting these things rolling and connecting with more people. We've already done one on finance. We've got one tonight, which is all about a step-by-step guide to personal budgeting. Before we do get started, if you don't know, bathrooms are into the kitchen through either side before you hit the door. If you feel like having a shower whilst you're here, you're welcome to. There is one on the left, but I don't recommend doing it. Not right now, at least. Feel free to help yourself to anything that's in the bar fridge below the bench top. If it's above the bench top, it says $10 in it. So you're welcome to have some whiskey or gin if you'd like. Cheap as you'll ever get it anywhere else. Throughout the night, we're going to be talking a lot of stuff specifically around personal budgeting. You might find some of that a bit daunting or scary or confusing. That's all right. We all probably feel exactly the same, myself included. But if there's anything that anybody says tonight that doesn't make sense, I encourage you to throw your hand straight up and be like, what does that mean though? Because sometimes people who do this stuff all the time can say acronyms. I'm turning that down. You good, Josh? We got that. We can use acronyms that don't make sense. TLEs and all of a sudden. So if something doesn't make sense, if it's not working for you, throw your hand up, ask that. We will create a Q&A session towards the end of it so we can get more in depth. And if you feel like you want to have asking some questions that you don't feel comfortable in front of everybody else, you'll get contact details of James. Obviously, you've got contact details of our team as well. And you can always reach out to us and say, hey, I just want to talk specifically through something that I've got going on. And we'll rock and roll from there. Any other questions? Great. There's plenty of food floating around. Help yourself to it. I might relocate some food to the other side over there because it looks like you guys are going to need some, maybe. I don't know. What I'd love to do is introduce my mate James. James runs an exceptionally interesting, innovative and great financial advisory business called Northeast. I've spent a lot of time with James over the last 8 or 9 years, maybe, give or take, around that long. James has done some stuff with myself personally, as well as a lot of stuff with clients here at Illuminate and obviously a lot of other people out there. What I love about James is he's, from the day that I met him, he's very much on impact and what people actually need rather than how can I make money out of people doing what I do. And it's evidenced through what he does. It's all about goals-based advisory. It's all about ethical-based investment and a whole bunch of that stuff that's mushed in together. But the core of all of that is ensuring that you actually know what money you have before you can even go and do that stuff. So I'm going to hand over to this guy. He's going to talk a lot, hopefully not too much. But thanks, mate. I really appreciate you taking the time and doing that for us and for our people. So give him a clap. Carry on.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really, really excited to do this. I'm always super excited to talk about this because I genuinely think it makes a difference. Truthfully, the actual topic of cash flow and budgeting, I can appreciate because I understand in my own life, there's not a huge amount of excitement for people to complete budgets and understand their numbers to the nth degree. But I've been talking cash flow with people for more than a decade now in a lot of detail, and I've come to realize that it is like one of the most important things to enable you to be able to have financial success. And there's very few exceptions to that. Probably the only exception is where you might come to us, for example, with a pile of money already, where your financial behavior is just, it doesn't matter because you've got so much left over. Or if you're lucky enough, you might have a business, for example, and again, things are flying to the extent where your financial behaviors don't really make much of a difference. Cool, if that's the position that you're in, hats off to you. But even then, when we talk to those people and we start to deep dive into what they want to achieve, we realize that, hey, actually, we still need to know this stuff. And the reason being is because if you think about for most people, we say in our business, people set their own walls. What I mean by that is that if you were to sit down, I've had the experience of sitting down with someone and saying, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And verbatim having someone say, I want to have the place in Brighton and I want the semicircular driveway so I can park my cars out the front so people can see them. And then only an hour and a half later, sitting down with someone and saying, oh, what do you want to achieve? And them saying, look, to be honest, I just want to be able to not have stress around my finances all the time. I just want to be able to feel like I don't have this pressure on me always. And following those two really strange successive meetings, and this is quite a few years ago, I reflected on the fact that it's not by coincidence that the financially successful business person has the ambition of the Brighton place with the cars, because this person perceives that they can achieve it. And the next person who has much tighter cash flow, they don't talk about Brighton and they don't talk about cars because, again, they've set their walls in line with what they think is realistic. And so your walls, your goals, what you want to achieve, the big ambitious things, if you're crushing it and you're doing really well, you're likely to just have bigger walls. You'll probably want to go on more holidays and have more adventures and retire earlier and hopefully contribute more and all of those meaningful things. And if that's where you are, then again, your ability to understand your cash flow and, hey, what can I actually achieve? What can I actually do? How well can I live my life without blowing my money to smithereens? And so that's why for mine, this has become such a big thing in our business. As a bit of background, I went out on my own as a financial advisor in 2015, beginning of 2015. I'd worked at a bank for about 3 years, and I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't advice. It was just product distribution, and it just felt like that the entire time. You'd sit down with people and you'd say, here's my little rack of things that I can offer you. Which one of these is going to suit? And it just wasn't right, and it didn't feel right. And one of the things that I hated in particular that I really, really pushed, mate, I really pushed was around cash flow. I remember speaking with my managers and my executive managers about individuals that were coming to me saying, hey, these people are going to get so much more value from having like some discipline around their financial behaviors than we could offer them on this rack of products over here. And I think I can really easily build something and meet with them regularly and change their behaviors, and that would actually make a huge difference for these humans. And the response that I kept getting was, you've got a good rack of products over here, so just stick to the products and let's just stay over here. And that was a big moment for me. This would have been 2014, a big moment for me to realize, hey, I'm in the wrong place, because there are people here right now that need things that aren't here, and they need it, desperately need it, and we can't offer it, and I'm not going to be able to offer it here. So in that sense, like cash flow has been a big thing from the get-go. When we went out on my own and started my own practice, one of the very first things that I did was said, okay, how are we going to fix that for people? When we sit down with people and we're talking about where you're going, how are we going to build structures and systems and do it in a way that is going to enable people to feel confident about their cash flow? And so I tried something and it failed, and then I tried something again and it failed, and then we got really granular with expenses and kind of like a zero for everyone's personal expenses, reconciling. We actually did zero for everyone's personal expenses for a tiny little while there, and it failed. It was too difficult. And so what you're looking at here is I think we've got a budget plan that we're running right now, which is titled Northeast Budget Planner V18. There's a reason why it is V18. It's because there was a V1 and then a V2, and we've continued to iterate and change and adapt. And there's, in particular, the last 12 months has resulted in a big number of significant iterations to that. Can anyone think of why there's been such a big focus over the last 12 months? Anyone at all? Interest rates, anything else, higher costs, inflation, everything has been crazy over the last little while, and it's for a lot of people, it's created a situation where they've gone from a phase of saying, hey, actually life's pretty good, to now saying, well, actually things are super, super, super squeezy. We are, anecdotally over the last couple of years as a business, the number one reason why people would call us 2 years ago was to say, hey, I've actually got quite a bit of money, it's just sitting in offset, it's not really doing anything, wouldn't mind investing it, doing something. That was the number one reason. That's not the number one reason anymore. That call very rarely happens. Most of the time it's, I've got plans, but also I've got some concerns, and I need that balance of how to feel comfortable and also know that we're making more progress. So as a result, I'm really proud to say that we identified not only that this was really needed by a lot of people, but also it was needed by people who, most needed by people who can't afford it. We had a lot of calls, have had a lot of calls over the last 12 months in particular from people where, frankly, they're not suitable for our business simply because they're not in the position to be able to pay for this, but they need it more than anyone else. And so we partnered with a group called RASC, if anyone familiar with RASC education, and they do some really, really cool stuff in the podcasting space and also the online space. They're one of Australia's biggest producers of financial education content. They do a killer job, and we actually gave this whole program away for free. So Now, people don't need to come to us. If your only focus is just cash flow, there's a whole program that I've given away to Rask and built out with Rask that you can jump on and download, or anyone else say, hey, here you go, here's where it is. Now today, when we go through this, I'll give this away also. So at the end of this, if you want to go through this and do it yourself, I'd love for you to do it because I know it makes a difference. So you're going to get the tools to be able to do it. I'm going to take you through how to do it so that you can be crystal clear on where your finances are and also have a real indication of where you're actually headed. So we'll talk about that as we go. Now, I'd be really grateful as we go through this. Andrew made a great point of saying that it would be cool if we get any questions, etc. If there's anything that stands out, again, stick your hand up, don't be afraid to ask. I'd rather not be yapping on the entire time, frankly. But also, have the courage to be vulnerable in the group. If there's something that you're in particular concerned about, I promise you there's a very high likelihood that there are other people in here that are concerned about it too, or want to ask the same question, so please don't be afraid to seek to understand how something applies to you individually. And so as a start here, I'd be really grateful to get a sense for who we've got in the group here. So I've set up 3 simple camps. We've got the a little concerned about my budget camp on the left. We've got camp B, camp A. Camp B is feeling pretty good about my budget, about my finances on the whole, but just keen to learn a little more. And camp C is I'm just here for the free beers. So can I get a sense, who feels a little bit concerned about your family budget broadly and here because you want to understand a little more? Can I get a show of hands, please? Cool. Thanks very much for sticking your hands up. What about camp B? Feeling good, but would like to get a better sense. Awesome. Is there anyone that's just here for the beers? Yes? Thank you so much. Amazing. Cheers. Okay. Let's get started. So this is one of the things that I can identify really early in my journey as a financial advisor. Most people that come to a financial advisor, they come to us with the desire to get their investments set up. That's the number one reason. It has been for a long time. If I had better investments, if my money was growing more quickly, then I would be able to achieve the things that I want. And this is a really normal sequence. You know, when people come to an advisor, they don't want more money. What they want is they want enough finances to do the things that are important to them and achieve their own personal outcomes. And again, that's different for everyone, right? No one's ever come to me and said, look, I really just, when I log into my online banking, I just want to have there to be a pile of money there. And I just want to feel great about the balance of it. That's not a thing. Everyone has stuff that they want money to facilitate. And that's, again, your goals and the things that are important to you. And so broadly, the number one reason why people come to a financial advisor, not just me, but most any advisor in the country, is because they say, if I could get my investments right, if I could make more money with my investments and so on, I'd have more money, and that would enable me to do the things that I want to do. So that's why I'm here in front of you right now. I want to focus on this stuff over here. Sometimes you do have the conversation where someone says, I don't have any money at all, I need to start that. But even then, they're thinking about getting themselves here and that being the way to get to financial freedom. I can tell you confidently that for the vast majority of the people in this room, in this state, in this country, this is going to get you to financial freedom. Because in the same way, it is true that if you get this right, if you absolutely nail this, it'll contribute really highly toward your goals. If you nail this, it will contribute really highly to this, which will contribute really highly to this. This is almost always the foundation of good finances. And we've sat down many times with people who do this remarkably well and this poorly, and we find after 1, 3, 5 years, we're not getting the outcomes that we wanted because we've built this whole thing on shaky ground. You don't build for any building, strong foundations is like a primary thing, right? Your cash flow are your foundations. And unfortunately, of course, these foundations are moving a lot at the moment, like more so than we've had, certainly in my generation. So what you're looking at here, left-hand side, we might have all seen a graph that looks a little bit this boring. This is interest rates. We go down here to 2021, 2022. Obviously, we just had COVID. That was shit. And then we went into this period of ultra low interest rates, 0.1%, and the Reserve Bank saying, hey, we're not going to touch these until realistically 2024. We're feeling like that's a great strategy. Thanks, Philip. That was wrong. And obviously, as a result, we've seen rapid inflation, and the way to curb inflation, or a way, of course, with this system, is to ratchet interest rates up. Now, to be clear, the reason why that happens is because if you're using the interest rate lever if you're using it as a lever to control the economy, one of the key things that you need people to be sensitive to the lever. Because if they're not sensitive to the lever, then moving the lever up and down doesn't change anything. And that creates a problem. And what we had during this period is we had a lot of savings in that 2021-22 period. There were a lot of government grants. Unemployment actually was still pretty strong throughout COVID. A lot of people didn't travel. They didn't do a lot of things that they wanted to do. We had home builder grants for developments, which did a lot to fuel more growth in the economy. And as a result of all of that, we actually came out red hot out of COVID. And as a byproduct of that, when we came out of that, consumer spending was high. When consumer spending is high, then prices go up. And if you don't get on top of that, like Google Zimbabwe inflation if you ever want to know how bad that can get, and you end up with scenarios very quickly where you're holding $1 trillion bill if you don't curb inflation. It's actually incredible the way that happens, but it's like that rolling stone that gathers momentum, and it gathers more momentum, and it's very, very hard to stop once it's at full pace. And so the purpose of obviously raising rates is that when you increase interest rates, then people will have less free cash flow, and when you have less free cash flow, you spend less money over the counter, and that slows down the economy and puts the brakes on a little bit. That's why this is the vehicle of choice for the Reserve Bank. We have even today, the CPI, which is basically the reported growth of Australia, was released, and it's still indicating that Australians are actually still spending a fair bit of money on discretionary things, on a number of things, and inflation's still stubbornly high. And I hope that we're not going to see another rate rise for a little while. Personally, I thought about 5 months ago that we were actually straight done with it. I think we'll actually hold here and then come over the hill. I'll probably find out in November if I'm right or wrong there, because that's the most likely time we're going to see as to whether or not there are any more. But I'm certainly very sensitive to this. If there's a rate rise, who does it affect? Who's going to be impacted quite a few people, right? Yeah, it's going to hurt a lot. And if you still have a fixed rate right now, you're a legend. Well played. Carry on. So this is the inflation side, the cash rate. This here that you're looking at, this is CPI, which is essentially the impact of inflation and the way that the cost of goods across Australia is increasing. This is a 10-year graph. And so this growth here is very, very normal. That's a normal rate of CPI. We're talking about long-term kind of 3% or thereabouts. This here, this line, that's post-COVID. And that is your 5 to 6%, that angle there. And this is the whole problem that we're trying to battle right now. This is the whole purpose of raising interest rates, is to try to stop this from continuing up in a northeast direction, incidentally. And it's working to an extent. It's starting to curb, and it's still going down. The question is it going down quickly enough to justify not putting more rates on? Because of this, obviously, and I think we can all agree, costs are going up really, really significantly. And for mine, I can certainly speak to say that my income has been steady through the business over this time. And as a result, I've noticed that our monthly savings have done this and this and this and this and this and continue to get compressed. Does anyone else have that feeling from a cash flow viewpoint? There are a couple of ways that stand out to me to curb that, but the primary thing for people just like us is to start by knowing what your numbers are. Start by understanding what are my specific costs, and one of the benefits of that again is it'll allow us to project and be a little bit confident about some of the meaningful things that we've got right around the corner. So we need to start by finding the truth. And this is the boring bit. This is where he preaches the importance of a budget. Can I get a show of hands? Who has a budget? Who actually who has that modelled out and feels really confident about what their expenses are on a weekly or a monthly basis? Some of you. That's a pretty normal ratio, by the way. Of those of you that don't have a budget, I'd love to, if someone would be brave enough, can you name the reason why, or in your own mind, why you don't have one? Is there a particular thing that stands out to you as to why you don't yet have a budget?
I don't have one because my partner would jump on board and do it.
Great answer. Yeah. No one's feeling under the bus at all here.
We just weren't on the same page. One was really confident and happy with expenses, and one was like, I'm worried. So.
Great answer. Cool. Yeah. Anyone else?
I still live at home, so I don't really, my expenses are really low.
Yeah, don't change a thing. Yeah.
Thanks, Mum.
Good answer. Anyone else?
I guess previously the offset account just kept on growing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we never really kept going.
Yep. Yeah, great point. That's one of the biggest reasons that we hear too, which is that up until recently, it hasn't actually been a problem. So out of all the things that I've got to focus on, work, business, career, work, business, family, all the other, just the thing, and the things that I want to prioritize, hopefully you want to prioritize family and work and business, but it's just something that doesn't command my attention right now. But of course, as we were talking about in that previous slide, things are changing. Things are likely to stay where they are for a little while yet. We're likely to have high costs for a while. So if you're still in that position where it doesn't make all that much of a difference, then cool. But for a lot of people, it's time to revisit that position. So this is our budget planner. It started off as just a process of entering your numbers, and then that's the number and it comes out at whatever it is. Great. And then we can very easily work out, okay, what's left over. That's where it started. And then, we went through the Vs. We went through to the V7s and the V9s and the V15s, and we kept adding things. And so it started there. Then we added an income feature. Let's add your income so we can actually work out what's left all the time. Then we added a fixed loans feature. So has anyone got a fixed loan at the moment? Some of you? Terrific, great. So at some point they're going to revert. Mine reverts in February and it's going to hurt a great deal. And so understanding when that does revert, what's it going to revert to and what's that going to mean for me practically. Then stage 3 tax cuts came through and we got sort of confident enough that they were going to happen that we added that feature. So if your income's above 90? 90? Yeah, your income's above, yep, they've dialed in. If the income's above 90, then as of 1 July 2024, you're actually going to get more money back in your payslip every week, every month, whatever frequency you're paid, because the tax rates are going to change. And the 39% bracket, which was there before, is going to get wiped out. See, from 45,000 to 180, it's okay. Pay tax guys. Yes, that's right. 45 to 180 is at flat 30%. So we added that because we knew that was going to come, and so that actually makes a big difference for people. You get sitting down with a couple where we've got respective incomes of 130 and 130, for example. Hey, that's like 9-10 grand a year every year of free savings, like just raw savings because of the impact of less tax. So we added that feature. And then we added some sensitivity analysis to say, well, we've looked at enough budgets now to say, well, this means you're doing well, and this means it needs improvement, like a traffic light model to say, yep, you're all good here, and you've got too much debt as a function of your income, or your discretionary expenses are too high, or whatever. So we just kept adding all this stuff. And then it finished off most recently with a projections tool that allows you to not only say, based on my income and my expenses, here's what my savings is going to do over the next 5 years, but then also individually add your own costs. So next year, my family is hell-bent on going to Spain. which is something that has been a goal for us for a really, really long time. So we can drop that in to say Spain, 15K, and when is it going to be? And so like our projections, it continues upward, and then in September of 2024, it drops by 15 to take into account those costs. So it's very, very simple and very intuitive. What I would like to do today, please, is go through a simple hypothetical as to how you would complete that, because you're all going to get that tool to be able to show you how to use it, and then also what you can infer from that data. As Andrew said, we're here, both of us, respectively, in terms of if you want to discuss that data more. But for the business owners in the room, it's tremendously valuable because it will help you a lot to know how much income do I actually need from the business consistently to meet my expenses. And for the pay-as-you-go individuals in the room, it's terrific to understand, okay, based on my trajectory, where am I headed, and can I afford those costs that I hope for in the future?
I might note as well for the business owners in the room, when we send out an email summarising this, there'll be a link to register for the next iteration of this, which is a step-by-step guide to business budgeting, which will go, now if I run a business, how do I figure out what that looks like? So it then contributes into the stuff that we're talking about today, because that's, I found a challenge as a business owner at times, because your income is so volatile.
Yeah. It's easy to run rich in business, isn't it? Really easy to run rich. Before I kick across, are there any questions that stand out in terms of what I've gone through just now? Let's do this. So I will, I'll start here by pulling open this budget planner. So I'll talk to it momentarily. We've done our best to add pretty much every line item that you're practically going to need. There's room for some additional inputs, but one of the biggest criticisms that I have of the budgets that get sent to us when we speak to someone and they say, yeah, I've already got my own budget, let me send it through, is that it's not exhaustive enough. It doesn't have a lot of the line items, which are real costs and need to get included, but they get missed. Like, for example, if you have a budget, most people's budgets won't provision for furniture and appliances, for example. Yet once every 3 years, you're probably going to spend a couple of $1,000 in that category at least. Which is reasonable enough. It's sort of on average about, I think for our members, about $850, $900 a year, back testing the amount that people spend on furniture and appliances. And obviously, if you're buying a new home or one of those sorts of things, then you could have a different number altogether. But there's so many of those that actually does change your budget significantly. And I remember when I was doing my own budgeting years ago, I was getting really frustrated with all of these anomalous things that kept happening, that kept getting in the way of what I thought my expenses were. So my expenses were, at the time there might have been 4.5K a month, so I should be saving this much, but this month was 5.5 because of this reason. This month was 6,000 because of this reason. This month was 5,100. I felt like I could never hit it, and it dawned on me that these are not anomalous expenses. If you have anomalous expenses every month or every second month or whatever, they're not random expenses. They actually deserve to be in there and reflected as part of your overall costs, because they're real, consistent costs. It's just that they're scattered over a number of things. And so when we went through this, we wanted to give people a prompt to be able to just think for a moment about each line item and just say, yeah, realistically, every year it's going to be about this much. Hey.
Do you suggest kind of funneling all those anomalous expenses down into these categories, or fleshing it out into more categories?
No, into these categories will work perfectly. You can scroll down, by the way. This continues on its merry way. So my experience is like having seen heaps of people enter these, and then the extra stuff tends to come up in the other field. So we saw, when we've seen enough consistency with an other field, it gets added here to ensure that we capture it all. So I would like to think that for most, I can confidently say for most human beings, that the categories we have here will give you the vast majority of your expenses, and it'll just be your own, it'll be your own personal random expenses that that we wouldn't provision for when doing an all humans budget. With this particular tool, one of the things we immediately wanted to do was take into account that people spend their money at different frequencies. So for example, who shops weekly? Groceries, yep, a lot of people. Does anyone shop at a different frequency, like once a fortnight or something altogether different? Okay, one person. So here's an example of where, in this case, we might have a weekly shop. I think for our family, it's probably around about $280 a week is our weekly shop. But also we wanted to provision for the fact that people have different habits. Like for example, it's not uncommon to see someone spend $200 a week on the Woolies or Aldi shop, but a $300 a month Costco shop, which is an additional cost. So what you can do here is freely enter these categories just as they best suit you, and it will over here it will automatically tally what that amount is and annualize it for you regardless. So you're not dividing by 52 or any of that, or multiplying by 52, etc. So in that sense, we wanted to make sure that as you go through this, you can look at it and as a house rule, you can say, okay, it's about this much, keep moving. It's about this much, keep moving, and continue that way. One of the benefits, and we'll come to this later on, but one of the benefits that we've got with this approach too is that we have a projections tab, which is firstly going to tell you about where you should be in the future if your income and expenses are correct. Right? But the extension of that is that we can retrospectively use that to confirm the accuracy of the information you put in this budget. Because we enter it right now, and let's imagine we enter all this information, and it tells us that in 3 months' time, our $40,000 worth of savings should be $52,500 worth of savings, because that's the pattern that we have. Cool. If we get 3 months into the future and we only have $48,000 worth of savings, if I were talking to one of my members, I would say, hey, well, explain the gap. Because the gap is either due to, sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, that's simple. We had a big cost here, which wasn't in the budget, an unexpected cost. And we say, okay, cool. Well then, if I add that in, beautiful, you're on track, which means that this is true or close enough to true right now. But sometimes that gap can't be explained. And then we go through a period of, perhaps 3 more months, and we say, okay, well, we're consistently seeing that your savings are not reflective of, or like your real savings are not reflective of the budget estimates. And in that case, it's time to go back and look at these numbers again, because they're not right. So there's a real benefit to this in that it's some people will go through this with just the finest tooth comb and relentlessly scour all of their transactions, etc., to make sure it is just perfect. And if you're the kind of human that can embark on a project like that and not just have analysis paralysis and fall over 3/4 of the way through, then power to you. By all means, go through it to the nth degree, because garbage in, garbage out. The better quality of the inputs, the higher the quality of your outputs. But my experience is that most human beings aren't that. Most human beings will start this, not just this process, but any budgeting process, and have the aspiration for this to be dialed in perfectly, and then actually never get it completed, or kind of fall over because this is harder work than I wanted. I think we've all had projects, right, in our own lives where we say, okay, I'm going to do this, and on reflection you say, yeah, I was probably too pedantic about it, and I was obsessed over getting it perfect instead of just getting it done or getting it started.
I can't tell you how many files I've got saved in Google Drive. Search for personal budget, it's 15 to 20 of the ones that I've started and never finished because I just wasn't happy with it, or I got distracted, or that it just never actually got to completion.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, you need this, my friend. I share this because if you are to complete this, I'd like to encourage for you, please don't worry about getting too granular. We'll have the opportunity to sense check this in the future and confirm that your numbers are right or wrong. Okay? And if they're wrong, absolutely we can go back and dial it in a little bit more. It would be much better for you to spend 20 minutes without going through the back-tested cash flow, like exporting your CSV of your credit card and trying to work out what's what. It'd be much better for you or your partner to sit down and say, okay, well, I think it's about this much a week, drop it in, and just zing through it. My experience is that when people do that, you're going to get accurate to plus or minus 10%, which, by the way, is better than you have if you don't have a budget. And and with a little bit of care on some of the bigger line items in particular, which is easy enough to see, you'll get it dialed in even further. So please, 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 progress over perfection. We don't need the perfect outcome here. We need progress. So I'll keep moving if I may. We've got clothing, for example. We're going to assume 400. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, by the way. Phone, that's monthly, and that's 89. We have internet, similarly, that's 60. People want to spit some numbers at me? What's subscriptions, pay TV? What do people spend a month on pay TV? Fire something at me. 20 bucks. 22s. Okay. Next one. Tech expenses, including home office. So this was an example. This was an example of something that kept popping up. So we realized that, of course, by the time that you buy your new phone every year, or once every 3 years, or every second year, once every 3 years you replace your laptop or whatever, that's actually not featuring here. So that's what that line item was for. Booze, what's a normal booze budget? Someone fire something at me? Andrew, you're not firing anything at me in this category. No, you're... Okay, all right. All right, we'll use Andrew's one, which, so we'll put, what, 20,000 or thereabouts? Yeah, cool. Hair and beauty, same thing. It's not uncommon at all to see multiple things where we say, okay, he gets one haircut a month.
You're in the line below, by the way.
Thanks. One, and then we have a bigger thing that happens every quarter, etc. And you can put in every frequency, it all comes out. So I'm going to try to keep things really, really simple. What you're going to notice over here, we've got personal, you've got your housing for council rates and rent and mortgage and all of the intuitive things that you'd expect to have in that area. If you have investment properties, there's your section, so you can freely put that info in. Transport costs, cars and right through to taxi fares, public transport, etc. Kids, dependents, education costs, any of those sort of things that you need to put in. Entertainment costs, gifts, restaurants, outings, sporting equipment, yada, yada, yada. So all the stuff that you generally pool around that entertainment side. And then any other expenses you have, and that's, as you can see, there's insurances and private health, and there's medical expenses, advisory fees, yada, yada, yada. So that's the entire spreadsheet. And my exception is, my expectation is that by the time that you do that, you're going to get a pretty tight figure. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and because I'm not going to enter all the line items. We're going to just, for simplicity, add an annual figure of 30,000 here. And the reason is because we're just trying to inflate the overall cost to something that would be reasonable for a household. So not that groceries of 30,000 are expensive, but we're currently at 47,000 of total expenses, which is, my experience is that's not reflective of where most households are. 30.
Escape. There you go.
Let's try one more time. There we go. 4 zeros. And then we're going to go down to go to a discretionary expense, like for example, we'll stick with hair and beauty, and we'll add another 20,000 there, which I would expect you to have magnificent hair at that price point. Yeah, or a beard. Yeah, yeah. A soft, silky beard. And we'll lastly go to holidays, and we'll add this line item. I'll give you some context as to why we're doing this shortly. So, again, this will spit out a number which is a lot bigger. We're now at 107. That's not an unreasonable budget at all for a household, in my experience. Again, there's expenses are this wide in terms of what the mean is, but we'll keep 107 in the ballpark just because it's going to allow us to run some numbers here. Now, one of the things you're going to spot over to your right of this is that there's something happening on the right-hand side here, which is that, as we mentioned, it's tallying that number, it's annualizing it for you, but it's also allocating it into one of 3 categories, which is lifestyle and bills and goals. And we have someone that understands that particularly well. The concept of this is that your lifestyle expenses are your discretionary expenses. They're the stuff that you've got control over. And we've automated this to the point where if you complete that budget, it will actually spit out what your discretionary expenses are, because we know that the hair and beauty stuff, that's the discretionary stuff, the entertainment expenses, they're all the discretionary things. And to be clear, we define discretionary as firstly, it's an item that's not needed, it's not essential, A, and B, or alternatively, it can be achieved at a lesser cost. So for example, we might all perceive a car to be essential, reasonable, but if you drive a Porsche, that's not a non-discretionary expense anymore. That's not a bill, that's now a lifestyle expense, or at least a huge component of it is. So based on back testing a truckload of budgets that we've received, we broke down and automated like, all right, if you have costs in this here, that's likely to be a discretionary expense and vice versa. Now there's a whole model that you can set your cash flow up using this tool to say, all right, well, bucket strategy. So we've got this much every month set up for my lifestyle expenses, and all of my lifestyle expenses are going to come out of that account. Done. And now I've got the right amount, and the same for bills and the same for goals. But I'm not going to geek out about that today because that'd be, we'd be going down a different path. But rest assured, if you want to learn about that, if you completed this process and then said, hey, we'd actually like to understand how we could use this to actually automate our cash flow, that's totally cool. Yeah, hit me up and I'll take you through it. That's really easy. Fred?
Question, not exactly related to all the stuff you're talking about. Like, so some of my expenses are paid through my business.
Yeah.
Like computer stuff or my car.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the financial year, my accountant people, they go and give me a tax bill.
They do what?
Something like that.
Yep.
And so how do I account for that in my budget? Or do I kind of get last year's tax bill and kind of go, oh, that's how much I paid last year, and then divide that by 12 or whatever?
Yeah, awesome. Really, really good question. You wouldn't put that in these items. So and the reason being is because when we enter income later on, what we're going to do is, let me rephrase, the costs that you have in your business are costs that come out before you pay yourself, right? And so whatever amount you take from your business has already had those costs filtered out of it. So if we were to add it into this budget, we'd be double counting. So you do get a bit of a free hit there because you could absolutely pile some cheeky expenses into your business, and this would look a little rosier. Now that's up to your accountant to decide whether or not you can do it.
Cover that element in about a month's time when we go through the business budgeting elements of saying what actually falls in here, and then you know what's left over to then stick into this.
Can I just get a sense check? Can I get a show of hands for business owners here, please? Great. Okay. So in that case, can I suggest these numbers here are relating to your own personal expenses, not the expenses that are through the business. Again, because the money or the expenses through the business have already gone through a filter, so that the income is left. That's a filter that reduces the amount that you can pay yourself.
James,
full question.
Just not to spend too long on the business conversation right now, but are you going to talk anything about strategies to smooth out the way income comes from businesses in terms of do you just grab whatever you want, or do you pay yourself a wage and that helps this kind of side of things?
That's your game, mate.
That's my game. That's cool. I thought you'd had some insight into that element of maybe
Yeah, happy to do it. But well, perhaps that's something we can cover as we move through. Yep. All right. So what I've done here, the reason why I put a higher expense in hair and beauty and a higher expense in groceries is just to try to create a better reflection of what a normal lifestyle balance would be, and normal bills and normal goals. So if we roll down to the bottom, just there, we've got total expenses of 107,000, but we've now got a breakdown of what are the lifestyle expenses, 45, what are the bills, and what are the goals. The goals account is always separate as a small little thing, I put in $10,000 for holidays. Gifts is another thing that features in goals, and the reason being is because those costs, we want to make sure that money's set aside for when it's needed. So if you were actually running your banking out using this model, which you can very, very easily, and it's very effective, the idea of having goals is we say, well, we want $10,000 a year for holidays, for example, so $200 a week, if we pick that frequency, a smidge under is going to go into that account, and that means that when the time comes to spend $10,000 on a holiday, the money's there and it's in the account and we're ready to go. And similarly, if we have for large families, Christmas can be really expensive with gifts, for example. So if we know what that budget is, then we can just have that money going in, and then when Christmas rolls around, we don't have the stress of saying, well, I'm sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul to make this work. So let's imagine that we've completed it and we're happy with this breakdown. I mean, this was an obscenely indulgent ratio for me. If we're like 45% discretionary expenses, that's more than double where it should be, but we will learn that as we move on. The next step is to input your income. And this is designed to be pretty straightforward. You can enter this a range of different ways. I'm actually just going to zoom this out very marginally. There we go. Now you've got two tables, and as it says, complete one only. Table A is for you. If you're a single person, then please put your inputs there. If you are a member of a couple, and I presume that if you're doing this budget, you probably did a couple, like a household budget, not just all my own shit. In that case, then you would put in your partner's income too. Now, a big part of this, one thing we will cover off is that if you're a business owner, of course, when you enter this information, it just assumes that you're just paying straight tax as an individual on that income. Now, if you've got family trusts, if there's companies, if there's structures that are designed to optimize tax, that's probably going to leave you a little better off, which is cool. But the complexity of that was way beyond a simple budget planner. So in this scenario, we're going to assume a household, and we'll just, for simplicity, assume two incomes of 100K. Got to make sure I pressed enough zeros there, check. And 100K again. And no other income, so no rental income, no self-employed income, yada, yada, yada. There's no fixed loan, so we'll skip that section. If you had a fixed loan, then you can enter it, and then when it reverts, it'll automatically kick in and talk about what impact that has.
James, just for the benefit of anyone else, in case a fixed loan is?
Yeah, thanks. Good point. Yeah, so a fixed loan is particularly if you have a mortgage, whether it's an investment loan or whether it's a home loan, if you can fix the interest rate so that it remains stagnant for a period of time, a set period of time, typically 1, 2, or 3 years. The upside is that if interest rates go bananas, as they have, and you had the foresight to fix rates, you have an interest rate right now of perhaps 2%, 2.2%, something really, really healthy on your home loan, whereas if the alternative is a variable rate which moves just as interest rates move at the time. So your variable rate right now for most banks is a late fives, late fives for a home loan in that sort of space. And for investment loans, you add another little bit. So for those people who have fixed rates from a few years ago, you've locked in a great rate. And if rates go up quickly, then you get the best of it. But the inverse is true. If you fix rates and then rates fall, well, then unfortunately that's going to hurt a little. On this section, we get your personal cash flow summary. So it's going to give a couple of immediate observations for you to review. The first one is your cash flow sensitivity. In this case, this cash flow sensitivity is good. You can see their total income is 200K. We work out that their net income after tax, assuming 100K each, is 150, yada, yada, yada. So according to this, they've got about $42,800 of savings per annum based on if their expenses are true and their income is true. Which is good. By our numbers, that's a really, really walloping percentage. If you're saving 28% of your income, that's fantastic. Their discretionary expenses are poor, and as you go down here, you'll see total expenses are 107,000. 55 of that, so we're at 37% of the total expenses here are discretionary as a function of net income. That's pretty obscene. In my experience, a good number, like for disciplined individuals, discretionary expenses are normally between sort of 12 and 18%. It starts to become a little bit more relaxed in the 18 to 25, even 18 to 28 mark, and above 28 is starting to really do these ones. So yeah, in this case, if this were a real person, we'd certainly be talking about how we could get that down and what impact that might have. Notwithstanding that they're saving good money anyway. So we've got a tab here for tax efficiency, especially if you're earning good income and if your tax efficiency is really low. This is basically working out what expenses you have that are tax deductible. So as you earn more and more money, if your tax efficiency is low, then obviously it's a bigger blemish. So if you're earning heaps of money and your tax efficiency is 0, that means that there's no investment properties, there's no investment income, etc. So again, it's something to look at. Stage 3 tax cut. So for this hypothetical couple, there's about $2,700 that's going to roll through as of 1 July 2024. And just to be clear on that one, The effect of stage 3, because it's a tax cut, it's already embedded into tax legislation, and it's just going to wash straight through. So for example, if you're making, let's say for simplicity, you're making 100, or let's just use these couple, we've got 200K, two $100,000 incomes. So they're probably getting something like $6,200 each per month if they were paid monthly. And so that's going to stay the same. Let's imagine for simplicity on 1 July 2024, there's no pay rise, they're still on a neat 100,000. Just magically, they'll go from $6,200 every month to $6,300 every month in their pay slip. That's how much they'll get paid to their bank account. Their income hasn't changed. It's just that the tax that's legislated on that amount has gone down. And so instead of the higher amounts, it's reduced. So this is a cool thing. It's a real thing that requires no effort. We just wait for 1 July to roll around and hope that Albo doesn't change anything, and that's the effect. As a side note, it's a shit tax. It really is poorly positioned, and it's not like it's. I don't think it's for the best, the better of Australians broadly, but it's there and it's been legislated, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. So there you go. Fixed rate expiries. If you do have fixed rate expiries, it'll automatically tell you what impact that's going to have and how that's going to take your income from, your savings from X to Y, and how that, the real effect that's going to have on your cash flow. And then lastly, down here, interest rate sensitivity. So this is a really valuable metric. We haven't put any mortgage repayments in for this hypothetical, so that's why this is 0. But had we have put this in, this would automatically say, well, if interest rates go up by 1%, or if they go up by 2%, or if they go up by 3%, here's the real impact that it's going to have to your finances. Candidly, this was more valuable, I think, 12 months ago than it is today, this section. I'd be horrified if interest rates went up by another 1% from here. I can't practically see how that would happen. But nevertheless, it's good to have a sense for, like they have gone up 4%. So it's nice to get a sense for, okay, at what point does this become extremely worrying for us? But yeah. I'm going to move across now. So we've got your summary section. The last section here is your projections. Let's get past all my Chrome tabs that I've got open. So I'm going to zoom out again, and then we'll roll through this. So this allows you, as we said, to actually get a crystal clear understanding as to where is my cash flow going specifically over the coming years. So it's very simple to complete. We're going to have a projection start date, and for simplicity, we're going to say the start date is like the 1st of November, 23. As soon as I do that, you'll notice that these dates change. So we've got November 23, and this continues on over the following 5 years. Now this looks like a straight line right now because the formula is pretty simple. What we're saying is that we've got no savings. Now practically we might have, let's say we had a scenario before with $40,000 of savings. So let's imagine these people have got $40,000 in offset. What you'll notice again is that this number down here goes from 0 up to 40K because that's the amount they have saved, right? Now this is it's very simple at the beginning, and the reason that it is because we've got $40,000 of savings, and according to the expenses and income that we put in, we're saving $3,500 a month. So what that means very simply is that at the end of month 1, which is going to be, we started this in November, so at the beginning of December, we should have 40,000 plus the 3,573 that we saved throughout the month. Now when stage 3 tax cuts roll around, as we can see, it actually goes up a little bit. That's already in there. It automatically happens when we get there. So we have this straight line. This is 40,000 plus 3,573 until June or July, and then it goes up by a little bit more. This section here allows us to properly stress test what your finances are going to look like. So if you receive bonuses, then you'd input these here, and then this will automatically sort of calculate, it'll add these lump sum amounts as and when it happens. But let's use this as a live example. We're going to assume that we have this holiday to Spain in September. So the status, there's only 2 options here. You've got money in and money out. So this would be money out. The amount, I think I said 15K. The start date, September. The end date in months. It's a 1-month holiday. And the reason is Spain. Okay. So what you've noticed, of course, is we've immediately seen this little pullback in the numbers because if you don't like the graph and you're a table person, that's the table month by month by month to let you know where you should be. Now, this is great for one-off expenses, but it is also excellent for ongoing expenses. Like, for example, if one of the common ones that we might add here, for example, is money out, this one's going to be mat leave. So we're going to lose $5,200 a month, for example, for a period of, let's say, from the 1st of July, 1st of June 24, and it's going to be a 12-month period where we don't have that income anymore. So again, we're just going to change that date. Hopefully I can, good, 12, mat leave. Okay. So again, what you're seeing very simply is that this has come in right here to reflect the fact that over this period from June of 2024, for 12 months, we're going to see significantly lower cash flow, which by extension is resulting in less savings. So it's quite, I'd like to think, it's pretty intuitive in terms of putting the stuff in. You've got a money out feature, but you've also got a money in feature. If there's money coming in, like you know that in the future there's going to be a certain amount that comes in for whatever reason, that's really, really easy to input. But as I was saying a little while ago, one of the advantages you get here is that you're actually able to, you can use this as a forecasting tool, and then you can use this as a sense checking tool. Because if you set this up, if you're inspired to complete this, and then we revisit this in February, according to these numbers, if we were coaching this particular individual, if this was one of our members, we'd be saying, hey, you should have 54K in offset right now, in savings right now, so where are you? And if they say, yeah, we're pretty much on the dot, we're at 54, they're great. They might say, no, I've actually got 70. All right, what's changed? Oh, I got a tax return back and it was 16K, brilliant. Okay, so it all checks out. I'll add the tax return in here and I'll add the date that it came in. That will spike up and this is gonna go to 70, which is, so it tells us that it's right. If alternatively, if we can't work it out as we said, then hey, we might need to go back and just like, there's something wrong, let's work out what's wrong. In my experience, like we can get deeper than this, of course. You can get deeper particularly about where you're headed and about your underlying expenses. But I don't think, unless you're looking at your numbers and seeing that you're trending downward, which can happen, especially if you're trending downward aggressively, I think that this is good enough to give you a good sense for where you're going. We use this as a tool to answer questions like, can I afford the next big mortgage? And we use it as a tool to answer questions like, can I start my own business because I'm sick and tired of my boss, they're driving me nuts. We can use it as a tool even to say, plugging in with an accountant to say, all right, well, if I'm going to employ someone else in my business so that I can grow my business, it means that I'm going to go from earning an income of like, I'm taking my current income of $15,000 a month, for example, down to $10,000 a month or $7,000 a month. And I think that's going to happen for about 12 months until it all starts to work itself out again. So how would that practically affect me in my own life? How would it practically affect my own finances? And so, as you can appreciate, it certainly has a lot of use if you're in that, if you're anticipating costs in the future, or again, if you're uncertain as to whether or not you're going forward or backward. Are there any questions that come to mind? Hey, Fred.
How do you manage the individual buckets of money that you have aside for things like holidays and stuff? So, like, perhaps we can have a separate bank account for a holiday fund. So I get an email saying there's a Virgin cheap flight somewhere, and I just go, oh, I've got $5,000 in my pretend budget, and I go and book a cheap holiday somewhere. Like, that's probably, can't really see that in there, or can't really work out how much money is in my budget right now, or what impact it's going to have in, if I look at a 12-month view or something like that. Like, would you actually advise people to get a separate bank account for like their holiday fund or for big things like that? Or if they didn't have a bank account, what other tool do you think they would use to see how much money is in such a thing?
Yeah, Yeah, yes, I would absolutely advise that people have a separate bank account for their goals, which is holidays, gifts, like those bigger lump sum expenses, because when you do that, it doesn't pollute your personal expenses, and it's not so much about the expense; it's that it distorts your real view of your actual expenses. Because we're happy to put these as non-normal expenses, right? We already have a holidays line item in the budget. So if you're thinking about this trajectory, like this path here, consider that this monthly cash flow position is already assuming that $10,000 per annum is leaving your savings for holidays. So what we would normally do is if people properly set their holiday budgets and they say, look, on average I spend, in the past for us, I think it's changed now, but in the past we were very commonly setting a figure of somewhere around 10K for people who might want to take a good domestic holiday with the family once a year, and then like sort of on an annual basis, and then every second year take a larger, more meaningful holiday. And so in that case, we might average it out at 10, for example. If someone says, I want to go to Disneyland and it's going to be 25 because we're going to LA for this unforgettable holiday, we'd look at the gap between what was allocated, which was 10, and the amount, which is going to be 25, and we'd add a one-off cost of 15, which would be the shortfall that we're going to have to practically claw out of your day-to-day expenses. Do you feel comfortable with that answer? You're welcome. Hey.
And you've got surplus cash, wouldn't you be better if you've got a mortgage, you're better off having that in an offset account, offsetting interest?
100%. Yeah. So our advice almost always when you're running this, if you have a mortgage, please, this main savings account should be your mortgage. Hayley, what do we got? CBA, Bank of Melbourne, Macquarie, multiple offset accounts. Who else we got? Bank West. Yeah. So if you there's quite a few banks out there that they'll let you have a lot of offset accounts. And so if you want to have a standalone savings account, hey, why not have that as an offset account too? Because obviously the more impact it can have. Chat Hale if you want to know, if you want a list of banks that can do it. Yeah.
Along the lines of what Fred was saying, I guess is this tool's great to visualise what you're going to do. How do you visualise what you have done? Because if I was going to spend, if I said, I think I'll spend 20 grand on whiskey this year, and I blew that in a month, that's not what I do with whiskey, by the way. Not anymore. Now interest rates are going up. How do I track and know that? How do I know what I've spent on my groceries and those things? Because, like you said, it might be if I look at this in 6 months' time, I might be 10 grand out. How do I know what that 10 grand was if it's not an obvious, oh yeah, I spent more money on a holiday?
Yeah, thanks. So we'll start from a position of identifying that the numbers don't stack up, and then we'll deep dive into why they don't. So if you're completing this from afresh, I mean, it's a forward-looking budget. So if you complete it today, the mistakes that you made in October and September are not captured here. But once you have set it up, then again, we've got those data points to say you should be here. And so if you're working with an advisor, of course, then you've got that regular cadence of accountability to be like, hey, what on earth, what happened here? But if you don't work with an advisor, then that's the importance of going back to it from time to time to say, according to these numbers, I should be here, and being able to call yourself out when you're not where you should be. But we can't stop you from pressing buy on down.
Yeah, it's probably one of those ones where it's like, you're like, I'm happy to assign this much money to that activity.
Yep.
And then you just forget that you spent that much money, or your partner spent something in that activity and you also spent something, and all of a sudden you've gone over without realising. I know there's like I say, as you kind of talked about, the iterations of other tech that have done it that massively overcomplicates it and makes it not enjoyable at all. Yeah. It's more that, like, how frequently would you be reviewing that and updating that and looking, I guess, at the reality of what's happening versus what you suggested should have happened? Because I'd like to think that whenever I put a budget together, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'll only spend this much on that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then the better thing's there, and I want the better one, or another kid has a birthday, or you have another kid that you didn't think about, all those kind of things, right? And all of a sudden, crap, that's not right anymore.
Yeah.
Now I have to sit down and do it again.
And do it again, yeah. Look, to address the point at the end momentarily, if you've done this once, iterating is actually real easy. Because once you've got the bare bones of it, you'll find that going through and saying, okay, this is what it was a year ago, does that still feel right? It's actually quite intuitive to say, oh, no, that's gone up since then. And yeah, so my experience is that updating a budget once you've done it is quite fast. If you're just setting this up for yourself and want to get the most out of it and particularly have some more accountability around the expenses, like for example, not going over budget, one of the simplest ways that you can do that, a very clean way, is just to focus specifically on what we call your lifestyle expenses, being the discretionary ones, right? And the thinking around that is that although your bills are non-linear, like you might have 1 month where you have rego plus insurances plus all these costs come out at once, and then the next months are lower, so it's not a straight line every month. You don't normally have a lot of capacity to just like blow a ton of money in your bills. Most of the money that like the behavioural stuff that you can improve happens in your lifestyle expenses. That's why we segregate it to the side in the first place. So in this case, for this hypothetical scenario, we've got like $45,000, $46,000 of lifestyle expenses. So if we were cool with that, then one of the very best things that you could do as just that next step would be to say, all right, well, $45,000, well, we've got the number right there. It's $3,808 a month. So Andrew, Ivana, open an account, offset account ideally, put $3,808 in it, or thereabouts, and I want you to make sure that all of your lifestyle expenses come out of that. And then what will happen is that it's impossible to spend 20K on whiskey because you don't have 20K in that account. And we do this with quite a few of our members using each one of those bills and each one of those accounts.
So it's kind of good to have three, have a lifestyle.
Lifestyle and bills and a goals account. That's right, spot on. And in that case, the benefit is that it has a floor, right? So like you've got $3,800. Like intentionally, I don't want to have relationships with our members where we micromanage and say, hey, you shouldn't have bought that second coffee at the beginning of the month, because I don't want that relationship with people, and I don't think people want that relationship with their advisor. What we want to do instead is to look at the bigger picture and say, if we've accepted or we've agreed as part of your advice that this is a reasonable amount to spend in your discretionary expenses. If we were concerned about it, if that wasn't true, then we would have stuck our hand up earlier and said, hey, that's silly, that's got to change, right? So if you stick to your rails, spend it how you want. If you want to spend $3,000 at the beginning of the month on something momentous, go for it. But it just means for the remainder of the month, you've only got $800 for all of the other discretionary things that you want. And vice versa. If you have something that you're have a big expense coming up later in the month, like the Bucks weekend, or a meaningful birthday for yourself or your partner or family or whatever it would be, then a huge gift that's going to happen. Like those sorts of things you can trim your behaviours at the front end and still remain in line with your overall discretionary expenses. And I think that's got merit because as a house rule, your bills will be consistent throughout the year. So if you own your discretionary stuff, then you'll go a long way to making sure that you don't go overs here.
Kind of following on from Andy's question, sorry. So we're setting this up for the first time, and you said spend 20 minutes on it-ish, no extra. Do you then suggest within a month just to make sure that 20 minutes we spent was quite accurate, adjust whatever we need, or do we do 3 months' time?
Yeah, I don't think you'll have enough data after 1 month. Is my intuition. So I'd suggest after 1 month, if you were unders or overs in terms of your expenses, you wouldn't confidently be able to move it. I think we advocate that especially when you've got a partner, that there's a monthly conversation that just to reflect on how the month went from a cash flow perspective. But most of that conversation is actually focused around the discretionary expenses. So again, the thinking is that the bills should look after themselves. You might have a particular month where your bills account is really light because all of your expenses in bills are coming in a couple of months, when again, all of your annual regos and all of your insurances and all those things just fall due at exactly the same time. And so if 1 month is really, really high, then the other months commensurately need to come down a little bit to take that spike into account and still average out, right? So like my wife and I have run this model to great effect, and it started off as, for the first few months, as something that we really dialed into, and it's still important, but and it's still a conversation for us, but it's just so much simpler a conversation now because we've had it a lot of times. So how did we go for the month? Did you feel like it impacted your expenses? Did we run out of money really early? Did we learn anything about the budget at the moment? And if you consistently over a few months saw a pattern of like, hey, we've always got heaps left in our lifestyle account, cool, fantastic. Maybe you've overestimated some of those expenses and you can rein it in a little. Maybe some people have really expensive lifestyles in summer because they're out all the time with their mates drinking Prosecco's, and in the winter they're at home making stews, So in that scenario, there might be a bit of a change. The more conversations you have about this, the better as a house rule. But in terms of practically changing your budget, you don't change it until you've got some data that you're confident about, and I think it'll take you a few months to get that. Good question.
Talk a bit about the tax efficiency on income metric that you had in the summary.
Yeah, absolutely. So under your expenses column over here, there's a number of expenses that we've marked out that we perceive to be as a house rule tax deductible to you. Some examples of that: professional memberships are likely to be tax deductible, advisory fees are likely to be tax deductible, investment loan repayments are likely to be tax deductible. Up here we've got a huge section for investment properties, right there. Of course, the vast majority of those are going to be tax deductible. So what we're doing is we look at your entire expenses, of course, and then we confirm how many of those expenses fall into those line items, and that gives us a reasonable sense for what sort of what sort of composition of deductibility you have in your expenses. I think I might be through them all. Does anything else stand out for anyone? Does anyone else want to clarify anything?
I have questions for later, but I don't know if you've got other things to share before I roll into from other people that have sent stuff through.
This is my last section here, which is a cap of where we're at, a recap. So perhaps we do it after that. So if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
So just to confirm some of the next steps here, everyone will send out that budget planner along with some guidance and how you complete it. If you want any clarification on how to complete it too, hit me up. I'm happy to help. You're not going to be on the clock. If I can avoid you being on the clock, like if it's simple and it's just, we can spend 10 or 15 minutes, and let me know. Would love to help. Complete it and then also, review the results. And it says check in after a few months to just sense check those numbers and make sure it's right. When you review the results, if they look good, if that graph is going up in a nice way after you add the things that in our own lives we anticipate happening in the future, whether it's the kitchen reno or the holidays or the mortgage or the bigger mortgage or the moving to a bigger rental or whatever it would be, put those in. If you're happy with the numbers, cool. If you're not happy with the numbers, then obviously we need to go back to them in some capacity. Check in again to sense check those inputs. Hit us up if you want help. One of the key things that we need to talk about here, because of course Illuminate's got this killer event next month, which is around a similar thing but focused specifically on business expenses and reining those in. We've got some joint members that we run this really effectively with, because for the business owners in the room, you've got your income. For most business owners, your income, total income, is often variable based on the performance of the business at the end of the year. And also, if you're looking to grow the business, then those decisions around how much do I actually need consistently to be able to confidently say I'm meeting my expenses? What's that hurdle that if I'm taking this much, I know that between my income and my husband's income, for example, that's going to be enough, and where we can comfortably meet our expenses. That's a really valuable number to have. We've done that a number of times, and I'm certain that if you were to provide just that budget to Illuminate alone and say, hey, here's what our expenses are, they can look at that and say, okay, well, thanks for letting us know, because now we know that under all circumstances we need to at least be at this level of income taken from your business in order for you to be able to achieve that. And so that's at the forefront of a lot more of the business decisions in the future around around growth and cutting expenses and all of those meaningful things that you might want to focus on.
In particularly with businesses, one of the big challenges we find when it comes to personal budgeting is business owners that use their business account for their normal expenses. So their bills get paid out of their business account, their lifestyle gets out of their business account, and so there's no habit forming of I get paid something and then I have a limited amount of money to then go and spend on those things. And we find, often you'll have a lot of challenges with business owners who'll all of a sudden have no money because they haven't had visibility on what they're spending because it's just captured within one giant account. And the other one we find, which is whether it's business owners or whether it's individuals, is obviously utilisation of like a credit card for points, which when done well can be really beneficial, when not done well can be horrendous. And everything just going through that one account. So with my handful of questions, I probably want to start with that one particularly. So we're talking about having 3 different accounts are really valuable. It gives us an understanding of what we should and shouldn't be setting on or when we've hit that limit. If people are utilising a points-based approach where they're saying, I want to utilise a credit card to earn as much points so I can go to Spain and it costs me nothing in 3 years' time, how do you approach that? What do you do to kind of maintain that still accountability there?
Cash flow, one of the things that we've observed with cash flow is that you want tension. You don't want slack in the system because things become harder to measure when there's a lot of slack. Now, the problem, it's a push and pull with cash flow is that if you wanted to truly understand what your cash flow was, the best way that you could do it is to have no slack in the system. It would be to say, all right, I think my expenses are this and not have $1 over and then just observe. And you'll find out really fast if those estimates are right. Because if you're setting the specific amounts in line with your budget and month 1, you run out of money on the 28th day of the month and month 2, you run out of money on the 24th day of the month, hey, it's taken us 2 months to work out that like the numbers are wrong. So now alternatively, if we start with account balances of $50,000 in each account, and at the end of month 1, we've got $48,300 in the account. In month 2, you can see how with slack in the system, your observations become lower. It's really common for people to want the credit card points, for example, and I similarly, I think like I'm a huge advocate of credit card points if they're used well, right? And so I don't typically seek to push back on that other than to say that you don't want it to compromise knowing what the true numbers are. For most people, when you complete your budget, you're going to find that the majority of your expenses are bills. Hopefully around about 75% of your expenses are bills. And so for people that do want to get as many points as they can, we would typically suggest that you deploy all of your bills to the credit card to still get as many points as possible for those. But from a lifestyle perspective, running lifestyle through a credit card and trying to understand what your numbers are, in my experience, doesn't work. You need to be incredibly disciplined, and for every person I've met that says, no, I can swing this, there's a lot more that you get after 3 or 4 months. You say, would you agree with me now that this is not working? Okay, so can we please change this and go to something that's more structured and have a cash balance that has a hard floor if you run out versus, let's say, a $15,000 or $10,000 credit card limit, and my mental note, I've got a $2,500 budget, so I can't go below $7,500. It's a squishy floor where you can go underneath it, and there's immediately for that particular transaction, there's no ramification.
Could you multiple credit card with low budget and effectively use them like that? Is that just getting crazy?
You could, but my experience is that most of the good points-based credit card systems won't allow you to have a $2,200 limit. It's minimum 10 or 15K through your rewards platinums and those sorts of things. So practically no.
I have more questions. Some of the questions that people asked me in the lead up today was about habit forming, and particularly running through this and understanding, cool, like I spend X dollars on that thing. Is that good or is it bad? Because this is suggesting I might spend too much on discretionary, but what thing in my discretionary might be a bit overkill? And then forming habits to firstly understand your numbers, but secondly to work towards improving and maybe changing some things that you do. what would some suggestions you would have in terms of like creating better financial habits utilising a tool like a budget like this?
We've gone pretty deep with this in the past, and we've found it challenging to meaningfully address people's individual expenses just because of the variance of people's expenses. If I may, I might be able to do this live because just here you'll note that there's a hidden row. I might be able to unhide it here. Just depends on whether or not the sheet is locked. This row here is another time. Gives the average of about 80 budgets for every one of these line items. And the purpose of that was actually to say, hey, this is the average for most people. But it gets distorted because you've got averages for expenses, for example, or for education expenses. All right, I don't have kids. That whole line is redundant, and then it should be distributed elsewhere, but that's not considered. You've got average for a mortgage, which is built in here. All right, I don't have a home loan. So it averages for holidays and all sorts of things, which we found the more that we did it, too often we had people say, look, this isn't valuable for me. I'm happy with the fact that we haven't found a solution for this because as a house rule, I don't think there's as much value focusing in on the granular stuff as there is focusing in on the macro stuff. So if however the composition of your expenses is made up, if your income is $15,000 a month net and you're doing incredibly well as a household, for example, and your expenses are $10,000 a month, like that's a really, really, really healthy ratio. And again, when you plug in your own goals and your own things that you want to achieve over the next 5 years, if that graph looks really positive and outwardly, if that graph looks outwardly positive, brilliant. That's really, really positive, and I think we should stick with that. If alternatively you look at those numbers and you say, based on my own goals and the things that I'm inputting here, I'm not on track or I'm getting further and further away from where I want to go, well then now we've got a problem where I think we need to get granular. But as a house rule, I think the high level stuff is the most valuable. I listened to a really cool podcast only a few months ago that was talking about individual expenses, and she was contextualizing her expenses in a really lovely way. She was talking about, I think she was talking about t-shirts in this context, but it relates to all discretionary expenses, and saying like that's a $60 t-shirt. I have to work for 2 hours to save, $60. Would I work for 2 hours right now or sometime next week in order to get that t-shirt? Like, hey, come into your job and do 2 hours and then I'll give you that. Is that a sweet deal for me? And I really loved it because almost always when you frame it that way, you're like, hell no, am I going to, trade that amount of my time for that item over there? That's something that we've used, like that concept we've used with members for a long time around if you look at your overall expenses, and especially when you see them laid out and you see the annual cost of your discretionary, the stuff that you like doing but you don't need to do, if you were to trim that, how big an impact would it have? And you can easily play with that to say, okay, well, if that changed from nights out and entertainment dining that went from $200 a week to $150 a week, what does it mean to my savings rate at the bottom? You can just change the number and it gives you that figure, and it commensurately changes all of your modeling and your cash flow and how much you're going to save over a 5-year period. So you can see that live. I would start there.
I had a number of questions around debt management, and I think particularly with the interest rate costs and people who had savings and now either are being depleted or they're concerned because of the number of the debt and where that goes. Looking at a tool where it talks about budgeting and then you're factoring in debt and expenses, which wasn't something we really went into. Like, how do you utilise a tool like this to look at how you're managing personal debt and hopefully reducing that over time?
A couple of ways. I mean, you've got your mortgage repayments on this in this section, and of course you can add your mortgage repayments, and then you can add the additional repayments that you're putting in if you're fortunate enough or working hard enough to be able to make more than the minimum. Alternatively, what we would look at is, like with our members, is we would look at that 5-year trajectory, which hopefully is heading upward, and then operate and say, well, what kind of impact do we want to have toward the mortgage over the next 5 years? Where do we want it to be? And then from there, we're taking lump sum chunks out of our savings that, like our offset account, for example, which exists in this 5-year model with that graph. And then we'll take out, say, 50K in year 1, 50K in year 2, and 50K in year 3, and we know that that money's going into the mortgage. We haven't built that in here. I entertained it for a little while, but it just wasn't a conversation.
So
that was
there's a
very
lot
common.
of like conversation that I get around is like, cool, like I guess like, what's the impact if I just buy less whiskey and I put that on the mortgage instead? Like, is it tangible enough for me to make that decision, or do I go, I'll just keep buying whiskey? I don't see that as being like that's not a big enough of a cause. You know, it's not 2 hours for a t-shirt. It's like I don't think I need to sacrifice that to benefit from there. And I guess weighing that up when we're looking at how much excess do I have, or potentially no excess at all, and making a decision, what do I do this or do I do that, and how will that impact me going forward?
Yeah, what I would normally do is when we go through this process is open up just go online and open up a debt repayment calculator. Just simply Google debt repayment calculator additional repayments is what I'd normally look at, because that then enables you to work out, enter your current mortgage, but then add, what about if I made extra repayments? But if that's happened a few times as a question, then as part of this, I'll just record a quick video as to how you would do that practically, and then I'll share that with you guys, and you can
That would be helpful.
you can run
Yeah.
this.
Another one we've got here is having a goal that requires you to have more cash to get to it. So I really want to buy this house. Based on my current situation, it's going to take me 10 years. How can I get there in 5 years, knowing that my income will not exponentially grow ridiculous to allow me to do that? So I have to then look at expenses and determining where to cut. So there's been a lot of questions around deciding what to or not to do to get to that goal, because it's like, I absolutely want to do this thing. How do I get there?
Your discretionary expenses, the expenses that rock up in this lifestyle line item here, they are the lowest hanging fruit for this all day, every day. You start there. When we're looking to make immediate progress with people's savings and looking to save for these meaningful things or have a faster trajectory toward them, always we would start there. And my experience is, for almost everyone, there's some fat here. Often there's a lot of fat here. So we would encourage that people, let's go through this budget again. Often we do this with our members and say, hey, let's go through it again and imagine that we were to rein it in. What could we get some of these discretionary numbers down to if we were more disciplined? And that would give us a sense as to, for example, well, once you enter that all in, well, then you're going to see immediately on that 5-year cash flow projection, you're going to see what the difference is. So saving for a home, for example, you might have the goal of having $100,000 saved, which would be sufficient to cover some of the preliminary costs and get in the market. If that were the case, well, changing those numbers, you can immediately see on that graph at what point the $100,000 becomes saved and how much sooner it becomes saved by where it was before versus where it is now.
Yeah, so you just set a date, negative $100,000. At what point does it go back to zero?
Exactly.
Yep. And probably the last one I've got, and see if anyone else has, and I was a little bit connected to a little bit of KP as well, like the approach of like couples, partners, approaching finance and budgeting together, where one might want to, one might not, or both might not, but no, they probably should. The accountability that kind of comes in that place. Like I know with Ivana and myself, Ivana to some extent just trusts me explicitly, Ivana being my wife, because I'm an accountant. So theoretically, I should be great at this stuff. Sometimes I'm really good at it, but sometimes it's like the plumber with leaky taps, and you're like, it's the last thing that you want to do. So in terms of like, I guess the dynamic between two people trying to approach something together collaboratively, and then bringing the accountability and understanding the importance of that, what would some recommendations or advice you'd have to help people to approach that in a way that becomes more enjoyable and less onerous and forceful?
Immediately in my mind, the obvious response, because you're dealing with a couple here, and of course, in any couple dynamic where you see things differently, then compromises where you're going to find the best solution. And I'm trying to make sure that I deliver this without my own natural jaded view, which is that this is really bloody important, because there's some people out there, right, that are like, well, it's actually not that important. I'm not that interested in it. Having said that, I mean, so yes, obviously compromise and good discussion and talking and finding that happy medium that's going to suit both of you is really important. But my experience in this is that if you have one member of a couple who really wants to do this and one member of a couple who doesn't want to do this, and you want to try to resolve that tension, it gets resolved predominantly over here by a willingness to do it. And I think candidly that a lot of that stems because of just the way that people see money. Like, people have different relationships with money, and some people you can have two people in an identical situation where one is really stressed about finances and one is not. And it's very, very deep. There's some very deep psychology about why that happens. But the person who is more stressed about the finances or is more concerned or wants to be more involved in and make more progress and so on, that's a really, really deeply rooted desire to want that change. And my experience is that it's hard to shift. Whereas the person over on this side that's probably a little bit more laissez-faire and happy to kind of roll with it, like they have, they're not as deeply anchored as this person over here. So, in a perfect world, of course, compromise would always just be finding a happy medium, but that often rarely happens with compromise. One person is more rigid than the other for whatever reason. With money relationships, the person who's rigid about finances has less ability to pivot. And we'd have to bring in a great psychologist to really understand that properly. In a practical sense, if you are, if you're part of a couple where there is a level of where there's a relative level of indifference, how you see your finances. I mean, obviously you can get all in and you can say, right, let's get a whole thing on this model and let's have accounts set up for the right amounts. You can absolutely do that. You can also do this once each. You can run a budget for the overall household stuff, and then you can say, well, we're going to separate out my expenses and we're going to separate your expenses. And I've seen that work really well, where perhaps there's one person that says, if it's okay, I really want to run this thing on rails because I just feel more comfortable about our household and our financial future if that's what we did. But I know that you want the freedom and the flexibility, so why don't we work out what your discretionary expenses are, because the bills, as a reminder, they're going to happen all the time anyway. They're often coming out of the household expenses, not always, depending on how it's structured, but that's a common thing for long-term relationships. Let's make sure that you've got enough money in your own account to still have the freedom to do what you want in a discretionary sense. And for what it's worth, you should be about here every month. And if you're staying in that sort of zone, like if you stay there, then I'm good because I know that overall the finances is okay. And you're good too because you've got that flexibility and you don't have someone peering over your shoulder saying, that was too much to spend on this or that or the other. I've found that to work pretty well, and it's a way of sort of everyone staying in their lane. Good luck.
Would this upload to Google Drive well? So like the business?
Yeah, it does. I can. I'll send you the Google Drive link for it too, if you prefer it. So we'll include both in the email out. Welcome. Please make a copy. Don't just add all your shit in there. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. So thank you for sharing your public information with everyone.
You can change your settings on Google Drive so that doesn't happen.
I think, anyway, let's not geek out about it. Yes.
Cool beans. Well, if no one's got anything else to add, James, thank you. It's always cool to see the depth that people go to build this kind of stuff, and as depending on where we all sit, as daunting and crazy or as simple and basic what you've just presented. I know it's taken years to get to the point of being able to have something that is actually helping people. And like you said, the people who truly need it, as well as the people who might not really need it, but still probably do need that. So thank you for spending your time with us tonight. I'd encourage anyone here, if you got any questions, you want to hit James up, obviously he's here tonight. You can get in contact with him. We'll have an email through that'll connect you to that. You'll get a copy of the information here. The recording of tonight will also be shared out too. So if you know anyone that needs to watch this, or you want to watch it back over and go, what did he say when he said that thing about stuff? you'll be able to do that as well as there'll also be the link to sign up for the business one, which will be a little bit different than tonight, but it'll directly connect into this kind of thing, because that is massive, the business side of it all, if you run one. So thanks, buddy. Thank you everyone else for hanging out. You're welcome to have a couple more drinks, eat some food, and carry on.